So good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Transparency Committee. I'm Councillor Joe Hargreaves and I'm chair of the committee and I will be chairing this evening's meetings. So this event is being live streamed on YouTube. Members of the public and media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and to listen to the discussion taking place. So I welcome you all to Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and everybody watching on YouTube. And before we proceed with the meetings, I just ask you to check that your phones are on mobile or switched off, whatever you want. I think it would be appropriate to start tonight's meeting with 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. I received apologies from Councillor Yankson. No other apologies. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare in tonight's meeting? Yeah. Thank you. So we have 3 sets of minutes that we need to approve. Those minutes have all been circulated before and comments are asked for, so hopefully we can take them as read tonight or just go through each one of them. So minutes of meeting that took place on the 26th of June 2023. As amended, were circulated to the committee in advance of publication. Unless the committee disagrees, I will sign these to the correct record. Thank you. The meetings of the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 22nd of July, again as amended, it's been circulated, so unless the committee disagrees, I'll take these as a correct record.
17th July. 17th July.
Sorry, but typo here. 17th of July, yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And the third set of minutes, the meeting 30th of October, again needs to be circulated. If somebody disagrees on.
I have got a couple of comments, sorry, that I appreciate clarification on in the minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I should have mentioned these before.
We're going to take the military record and then we'll do, or will they need amending?
They'll need amending.
Okay.
It's just on the statement of accounts. My concern for the expected credit loss, it was actually that there were 33% of the debtors. That's quite a high percentage. That was my concern, not the amounts. And also, I was quite clear, I think, and I appreciate that I had a concern about contingent liabilities being recognised in the accounts, and that's not minuted, and we should not have recognised contingent liabilities in the accounts. And I'd like that note changed.
Okay. So you're happy for me to
with those changes?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So we now go on to item number 4, which is the internal audit of the Grenfell expenditure. So members are aware, this was an item that was set up actually before, with extent Liz and Andrew, before we were on the committee. So this work has been going on for some time now, and what we have before us is the final report. And I'll just remind the committee before we, particularly for our benefit, if not, but the purpose of this report, the purpose of this was, the review is to provide the committee with additional comfort and reasonable assurance on expenditure, over and above that provided through the external audit of accounts and grants audits completed by other agencies for the period 2017-18, 2020-21 in respect of Grenfell response and recovery. That's the work we've been working on, and that's the work we've got in this report here. So David, I'd like you please to introduce this paper, if you may.
Thank you, Chair. So the report sets out the findings and conclusions arising from the substantive testing undertaken by internal audit in line with the agreed purpose for the review. The report recognises that there were challenges for the council, particularly in the early period of the response, and the council's procedures were not always followed. And examples of these have been given in the report to highlight the committee where those particular gaps were found. So a large sample of transactions were selected and examined. So the largest sample I've ever seen in an internal audit review in my long career. But it was important we did that to give the additional comfort and reassurance the committee were looking for through this piece of work. We took account of other sources of assurance in how we focused the sample, the nature of the expenditure that was incurred, and also looking particularly at higher value transactions, so those of over £100,000 each as well. So as I say, we concluded there were gaps in evidence to support items of expenditure samples, but there was generally a good level of supporting evidence for the sample of the 400 we took. Turning to the transactions over 100,000, so we chose this particularly and agreed this in the scope because this was the council's threshold at the time, both for key decisions and tendering of contracts. So we were looking there specifically for contracts being in place and also for key decisions to support that expenditure at that level. So we found very few instances where contracts couldn't be located, albeit we had some difficulty locating them, but in the end we got there. So I'll come on to that in the lessons learned. And we found 80% of cases where key decisions were found to support the expenditure over £100,000. Again, recognising some of the challenges, particularly in the first year and second year. So what we've done is provided the committee with hopefully a robust report that shows the testing that's done, a significant amount of work done. We've drawn the findings and conclusions together, and importantly, I think we've drawn out some lessons learned, which have been endorsed by the Council Chief Executive, endorsed by Mike as the Executive Director for Resources and others, and those actions will now be taken forward and overseen by the Executive Management Team. Some of those actions are already in progress. I'd like to just finally thank Andrew and Liz for their perseverance through this review over the last couple of years or so, and support for the process. To Lisa and her finance team, who were exemplary in their support for our testing, and my internal team who undertook a significant body of work. I think I'll commend to the committee that we've done a really robust, thorough piece of work here. I think we've answered the questions we were set in the scope which we agreed, and I'll put the report for the committee for.
David, thank you. Listen, Andrew, do you want to comment, any further comment on the actual nature of the report, the scope, or the work that's gone into it?
Well, you go first.
Yeah. No. I think we have been liaising on an ongoing basis with David, and I think he's put together a good report. I have some minor comments on it as I would, but no, I think it's been very well done in terms of the revenue, and I think we're reasonably happy about the capital expenditure because they were subject to external scrutiny in any event, but there were some concerns over the revenue expenditure. And I think it's been quite a comprehensive exercise to look at that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Well, I was just going to make a couple of comments about passage of time. This did start 2 to 3 years ago, and it started at a time when it actually wasn't very easy to see a clear picture of the whole expenditure. So the first task really was Mike through your previous deputy, Taryn, who produced this analysis over 3 years of 400 odd million expenditure, which is a lot of money, but it took a while to get that whole picture. It also, I think, took a while for us me as a member of the committee, but I think more generally as a committee, to sort of tie the knowledge we had about Grenfell with other committees in the council. So that took time to do, and I think that's been helpful. And then finally, of course, this can't be seen in isolation. This is just one slither of work about Grenfell, and I think quite understandably, it's had to go at the pace to some extent of other pieces of work that it needed to tie into. So for my purpose, I think what we've got is, starting with the appendix, a yard analysis of how much money was spent, over £400 million. So that's good. David has done, to my mind, some robust and extensive testing of individual transactions, and there's nothing really been found untoward about those transactions. But we should just remind ourselves that that scope was my words, perhaps backing up or echoing the words you said, Chairman, that this is about correct recording of amount and description of the accounts. This exercise was not about trying to work out whether the money was spent in the most effective way. They have to sort of put that boundary around it, and that was the prime focus of David's testing. And it hasn't really revealed anything material in terms of problems in that area. It leaves, in terms of findings, one or two questions, I think, which do need to be taken forward, and I think it'll be another discussion and decision as to what further work needs to be done. But I know from the report really that we as a committee, we're a scrutiny committee. We don't have executive authority within the council, and really we're at a point where we've answered the exam question we could set. I think the findings lead on perhaps to some more work, but that's really the responsibility of the executive manager. That last sentence is quite important, and we should just remember we are a scrutiny and oversight, not an executive.
Thank you.
In this and all other matters.
Yeah.
But thank you, Dave, for your work and good humour, and all your team and others involved. I know there's been a lot of work.
A lot of early morning calls and a lot of late afternoon calls. Liz, do you want to kick us off then with your couple of points that you want to raise on?
Actually, on the report itself.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose in 3.1 and 3.2, I just had some difficulty tying those together. You know, we talk about 92% over 100k, and then contractual documentation for 96% over 100k. Just to tie those together. And in 3.1, we say this was limited to 6 areas of expenditure. I only found 5.
Sorry, there's two corrections there to note. Sorry, there are 2 6s, there should be 5s.
Okay, so thank you. And the other thing is, in 4.3, we tested a total of 400 expenditure items. That's out of 87,000. I don't know how easy this is to do, and this is a genuine question. Because we focus very much on high value items, some of those would be millions. If we looked at the total value checked, it would be a much higher percentage of the revenue expenditure. I don't know how easy it is to actually get that. I think that would be, yeah. And I did have a concern about 4.7. We say once these initial actions have been taken, it almost seemed like a qualification to me. You know, there was a lot of immediate response when the tragedy happened and money was spent. So yeah, but once these initial actions, I'm just a bit concerned about that. And I think those were my key points.
If I may, Chair, so
I think it is answered. It's 4.1, it's 184 million out of 400,000.
Good, yes, you've done it.
yes, the 26%. So that testing covered 26% of expenditure.
Yeah, you've done what this is asked.
Okay, you've done that. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
I think just going to.
David, do you want to make any comments on it then? We'll go to the committee.
In terms of 4.7, that's it's recognising the emergency arrangements that were in place initially and the urgent actions that were taken. I think what we saw was evidence, not full evidence, but some evidence of that retrospective regularisation.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that actually, when when those urgent actions were taken, that there were steps taken subsequently to make sure the contracts were in place, to make sure decisions were documented, given that other parties were involved in those as well. Just going back to 3.1.
Yeah, I was just getting a bit confused about it.
So on 3.1, the first sentence is saying that 89, we found evidence to support 89% of all transactions.
Yeah.
400.
Yeah.
So that's those below and above 100,000.
Yeah.
And the 92% related to those specifically above 100,000.
And then also, then you've got more, then you go for 96% of transactions over 100,000.
And this was the contractual documentation specifically. So this is that sort of separates. So we were looking at evidence on the system in terms of invoices and so on. In the first part of the paragraph.
Okay.
And then the second part is looking at the contracts and the key decisions. So I should have broken that up more clearly.
Yeah.
There's two separate aspects.
Yeah, sorry, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, committee, any comments or questions of David, comments on the report? Yes,
Thank you. I thought it was an excellent report. I think it does give assurance as regards to the propriety of the vast majority of the spending. I thought it was especially excellent that we have lessons learned, itemised, listed. So I think this is really a valuable piece of work to add to the work that's already been done so far. I had a couple of questions, again, going back to that 3.1. What this means, I think, is that across all transactions tested, which is 26% of the expenditure, we've got 11% of those transactions did not have appropriate evidence. And when we're talking about the over 100,000, it reduces to 8%. And I'm wondering, first of all, what sort of amount are we looking at that wasn't evidenced? And second of all, where we are separating with the over 100,000, where we are separating the invoices from the key decisions and contractual documentation, is there overlap there, or are they?
So yes. So there is some overlap, and I have to provide some information separately to the committee on that. In terms of 96% and the 80%, so the 4% where we didn't have contractual documentation relates to about £1.7 million worth of expenditure, and the 80% where we did find key decisions, 20% relates to about £15 million worth of expenditure. I will also find out for you and extract for you the values for the 11% to the 8%, because they cover both the over 100% transactions and the ones below. Thank you.
Well, and I think that's all I have to ask.
Mr. Gardner?
Really, a lot of work's gone into this, and thank you and your team very much. I hope it will provide the right assurance. Just had a couple of questions on 4.4. When you tested in 2019, those figures, transactions you tested were less, but there is an unexpected drop in the percentage evidence. Can you explain why?
So I think, first of all, with the numbers of transactions we tested in each year, that's explained, we looked at the total value of expenditure for each year, and then weighted the number of items we sampled by that across each year. I'll need to go back and have a look at the reason for the drop in 2019-20. I mean, it's a smaller number we selected, and sometimes if you have a small number that are erroneous in a small sample, it pushes the percentage up a bit, but I'll happily go away and give some more information.
Thank you. And then my final point, which is more a sort of request, is 5.8. You talked about where further actions are needed, they'll be put in place no later than October 2024. That's almost a year away. So
the reason for doing that, I'll explain. Sorry, apologies, I should have been clearer. So you'll see from the lessons learned and the action, there are a number of things that link to the Procurement Act, which comes into force on the 1st of October 2024. So there's a programme of work going on now across the council to ensure we put all the right arrangements in place for that date in October next year. So that will involve things like greater transparency of the publishing of contracts, over £25,000. It will include publishing notices at each stage of the procurement process for contracts. It will include publishing a procurement pipeline for the year. And unless we have very urgent reasons, we can only procure those contracts on the procurement pipeline published. So lots more transparency in reporting requirements in particular, which we are in the process of working to embed in the organisation. The other key bit, I think for me is really important, that those who undertake procurement exercise all need to be trained in procurement. So again, the government is really setting the standard here for how procurement should in local government, public service going forward. So that's the reason for that October 24 date.
Or any comments? I know you came to this so late, but any?
I mean, again, I thought it looked like a very good piece of work, and don't really have anything else beyond what's already been said. I mean, some of those comments were ones that I was going to mention.
Emma, Councillor Denko, you said you wanted to ask a couple of questions, so.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. This, as David will remember, this piece of work emanated from a question when the statement of account, I was sitting on this committee, statement of accounts 2019 came out, and I said, where's all the Grenfell stuff? And it has been ongoing since then. It was approved the following year. So that's 4 years we've worked with this. And it is indeed a hugely forensic and robust report, which is it's I do find the issues about procurement rather frustrating, actually, because I'm sure some of you will remember I spent 2 years with Councillor Mason and Councillor Andy, and I can't remember his name, working on procurement scrutiny, and it was agony, and we came up with.
Andy Rinko.
Thank you, Rinko. And we came up with quite a solid document, and there were lots of very good recommendations which the council was supposed to. And that was I think it was accepted in January 2017. So that was 2 years of work, and somehow this is some of the procurement, and I perfectly understand the context. Of course, I do. Some of that has slipped. So once again, lessons learned. But some of that came up on procurement scrutiny. This is getting depressing. But anyway, that's having said all that. It is hugely useful, and I think this came about because of the community asking, where's the money gone, and of course this is just one stage, because actually they do want a value for money exercise. They do want to know actually where it went, and all the things that they're asking about, all these people coining it and making millions, all the rest of it, which I'm sure isn't true. They need reassurance on that. So that's another thing which isn't the work of this committee, I know. But it's been 4 years to get this far, and now we're losing some of our the progress that we made with procurement scrutiny. So I do find it rather frustrating. But thank you. I know exactly what people will be going for next. So it'll be probably corporate costs and all of that. So yeah, I think a lot of people have picked up on other issues that I have picked up on, and there is certainly more work to be done in this whole process. But probably not for this particular committee. It's actually where the money was spent and was it spent effectively, which is a different thing. But thank you. It's been 4 years. You got there in the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, I know you spoke at the beginning. Any particular questions or?
Well, I think it's good that we've arrived there, and I think that, David, it would be good if you provide some reassurance about the fact we're saying a large proportion, everything is fine, but there's a small amount, a small percentage, which isn't how much money it is, and relate that, if you could, to the materiality that we set ourselves to the exercise. Because one thing this can't do is to say, no, I can't say back to anybody that this is precisely right. And there's no amount of work we can do, really, that will prove that. We should just be reminded that we did look for external companies to carry out this exercise. They either did not want to do it or priced the work so unattractively as to send exactly the same signal. It was a too difficult exercise. So that's really cap, David, that you actually grasped, you leant into the problem and you took this work as internal audit and you think you've got us to this position. So I think it's good. I don't know quite how this handoff to the next group of people works and how they get involved. But I think it's probably a nice piece for me to be that there are findings and just have a clear sight of where it's going to. Because I can be satisfied the exercise has been finished, answering the question we were asked. But there are some interesting things as you're alluding to, and it would be nice to have that, information so that we're sure that this doesn't get lost. And
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. So particularly around procurement, we will be bringing further reports to the committee around procurement implementation of the Act and compliance with and the impact of procurement on procurement activity.
I would rather suspect we'll be doing something procurement in 5 years' time as well, but
And I'll have to catch with Council Ben Code separately, because we have built in quite a lot of what the scrutiny we did back in 2016. Have a chat with you through the things that
Yes, I'd like
make
to.
sure we've done everything, but
Okay.
where we haven't.
I'll say there's that side of it, and the other side of it is it wasn't money well spent on X, Y, and Z. Which was another hot piece of work for some.
thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. Just quickly, following on from the point about the concerns that residents have raised about spending, and also reminding ourselves that we are, as well as audit, we are also a transparency committee. If you look at, for instance, the published spending, the quarterly published spending, which the council does, there are aspects of that which are, I could say, less opaque than transparent. It may be that there's a piece of work that could be done there where some of the expenditure is not clear, that we could have some answers on that. Perhaps would that be something that this committee could do?
So, Chair, it's something that this bit of council submitted on Friday. There's some scope for the internal audit plan just to look at the transparency reporting the council does, and how it complies to both the legislation but also how it works. So that's something we could build.
Yes, yeah.
Plan going forward.
Okay, and then perhaps it'd be helpful for you, and maybe you've got these, if you've got some examples of specific.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
You can think of in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's to do with the labelling of expenditure.
So what I might suggest is that maybe in 3 or 4 months, we at least have a quick paper on the actions and what's happened.
Yeah.
And the lessons learned.
Yeah.
We don't need to take it as an ongoing piece of this, but just a quick feedback in some of it we appreciate it's not going to happen till October next year, but some of it will hopefully have happened. So
It's an echo.
Committee, any other questions or any other issues to touch on that? The committee is asked to review and consider the report, and hopefully we have reviewed it and considered it. And can I extend my thanks to Liz and Andrew, particularly for huge amount of work you put into this. So thank you, and it was great to have your external, really show the value of having independent external members of this committee. So thank you very much. And thank you to David, and pass your thanks on to the team, because this has been a phenomenal piece of work. And I think the response from the committee is evidence that you've done a good job. So thank you. Thank you very much. Can we now move on to item number 5?
Echo.
We need someone shouting at me over there.
You're making up.
So
The anti-fraud half-year report.
Indeed, Chair. So Andy Hyatt and Moira Mackey are currently at Hammersmith, where the audit committee is also meeting this evening. So yeah, pleasure my voice for this item as well. So I'll be brief. So this is the 6 monthly report we provide to the committee. It sets out the caseloads and the successes of the team over the past 6 months, and it compares on page 60 to the half year in the previous 2 years. You get a sense of direction of travel. Obviously, we've done a lot of work around the National Fraud Initiative and Fraud Hub, which we're working on currently. And this is where Cabinet Office do a biannual match of data across local authorities and nationally, the National Fraud Initiative. We've also engaged the London Fraud Hub, which is looking at more dynamic testing and checking of data on a more regular basis. So not only do we detect fraud cases and prevent them, frontline services will have the opportunity to look at data in real time to see where people are trying to access services who aren't eligible rent the happening before it occurs. As always, we've got a number of case studies which are of interest to the committee. Happy to pause there, take any questions from the committee, and I can't answer, we'll come back with written response.
Liz.
Yeah, I suppose my main concern about this, and thank you for all the work you've done again, was the trebling of the number of fraud cases. I mean, is that because there's more fraud, Or is it because we're just much better at picking it up?
So the big increase, particularly around the National Fraud Initiative, which is every 2 years. So that's accounts for a large number of broken outcomes in this half year that we didn't have in the half year last year. And actually, we had much more cases this year than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We've also got a good increase in tenancy fraud successes as well, and across a number of other areas. So I think the main reasons that National Fraud Initiative rise in cases.
So-
That's
so-
set out a bit further on in the report, actually.
So sorry, is that because the National Fraud Initiative is better at picking them up, or has there been an increase in fraud?
It's something that's done every 2 years. So it's we the areas where we focus on, particularly around things like deceased pensioners, looking at overpayments on VAT, housing waiting lists, the things that we don't tend to focus individual investigations on through the year because we don't get referrals of those, but we do pick them up through later.
So David, that's not quite what
That's
the
not
raised.
what I was
Sorry, do you want to repeat your question?
Try. Okay. There's been a big increase in the
Yes.
number. What I'm not clear about is whether or not there's much more fraud going on.
Yeah.
And does that give rise to questions about systems and controls that are in place? Or is it just a matter that, we're now much better at picking up?
I think we are. It's more the latter, and the courts now catching up as well in terms of cases that go through the courts. So things like tenancy fraud, for example, we've had a backlog of cases through COVID, with lockdowns, where we're actually getting now improving on the rates that we're getting. I don't think there's per se an increase in fraud against the authority. I think we are getting better at it, detecting it, and also
So we've missed it in the past,
what
is what you're saying.
We haven't missed it, we've just not discovered it.
We haven't discovered it.
So a lot of what the fraud team does, actually, particularly tenancy fraud, is reliant on referrals from residents, councillors, from the public. But actually, we found a decrease in that during COVID. We've had an increase since. So I think there's a number of factors there. I don't think it's something we've been particularly worse at in the past. I think we've got, we've used our resources well and got cases through the courts and getting better with putting referrals in as well.
I think your point, this is a valid point, isn't it? Obviously, there has been more fraud has been got away, language is bad here, but got away with in the past than is getting away with now, which is good now, but a reflection on the past. Yes. Sorry, you were.
No, I mean, I was just thinking that, probably some of them is because of the delay process. So you're catching up on some of the ones that were in the past that would have been counted, of course.
And we don't count until they've been successful.
That's
So I
right.
picked up on that one as well.
Just ask you, can we do the national audit, the national inspection every year? I mean, what's stopping it from being?
The Cabinet Office run it every 2 years specifically, so they mandate every local authority to put their data in, and we have to do it every 2 years. A fraud hub, which we're doing on a sort of monthly basis, the London one, is something we're doing voluntarily, which means the data goes in every month and there's more data sets.
It's mandated centrally. Could we still approach them to ask if we do it every year? Because it just,
But that's where the fraud hub comes in. So again, we're using that as to fill the gap in the 2 year cycle.
and which one's turning up more?
So what we tend to find so far is that the National Fraud Initiative every 2 year one does churn a number of cases. It has been reducing over. It's been going for about 2 decades now. It's been reducing slowly over time. What we're going to find with the fraud hub is more prevention. So actually stopping fraud happening in the first place. There will be detection as well, but it will be preventing fraud happening at the gate when people are applying for services.
Can I ask something that's actually not on this, but I read recently a lot about these QR codes being used, and councils have taken them out of the car box because people are putting another QR code on top. And as a result, you scan and you go into some other option. To what extent do we as a council use QR codes, and are we avoiding any scams?
I don't know the answer, but I'm happy to take that away and find out.
I was listening to Radio 4 and they were talking about this person who scanned her car parking, or she counts the car parking, and it's given a QR code. She'd done it, she put her credit card details in, and then they subsequently ran back a couple of days later, and that's when they take the money.
Yeah.
But it took her months to track it down. And you're suddenly going, and so as a result, one of these councils has just taken out all QR codes from everywhere. they're public spaces, and you see them on bus stops, you see them all over the place, and you suddenly go, gosh, that's the latest scam.
So I'm happy to go and find out more and report back.
And also on the parking, we only seem to look at disabled badges. I mean, I'm aware there's a lot more abuse of parking that goes on with people just misusing disabled badges. I have heard of people who got residence parking, they don't live here.
Yeah, so we do look at resident permits as well as blue badge.
Okay.
And
But
actually, yes, sorry.
the only reports are blue disabled badges.
Yes, in terms of the case, so we do look at them there. So I'll again get some more information on the
Yeah.
case we've had in the past. Again, this is where the fraud hub in particular will help. Again, when people are not in the addresses where the resident permit applies to. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about whistleblowing on page 61. We do have a whistleblowing policy, which of course is an essential safeguard. But I noticed that the volume of whistleblowing is not high. They've yet to receive any new whistleblowing referrals. So I'm wondering why that might be when we look at some of the types of fraud that we've been looking at, including things like conflict of interest and employment, false identity. Do you have any comments about that?
I think the first thing I would say, what I will is provide some information about previous years. Typically in local authorities, numbers are generally very low in terms of whistleblowing. And this is where somebody is blowing the whistle on somebody else within the organisation. So it's quite a narrow field in looking at it. It is about employees reporting on other employees or contractors. We do have some e-learning materials that we promote for staff, which we're talking to HR about making mandatory, so that they're currently on, along with a whole suite of other e-learning we provide. We have spoken to Contact about internal communication around the policy, which we'll have to pick up again. I think it's a message we need to keep getting out to staff to make them aware that the channels are there to report, but also actually reporting to User Audit Committee that actually these things are on our radar, and when we have cases they're reported to you. It helps give confidence to those blowing the whistle that they're investigated and that they're reported.
I picked up that as well. I just wondered whether sometimes when organisations introduce a whistleblowing policy, there's a great fanfare and it becomes a great focus, and then the organisation sort of forgets about it. And I just wondered whether, and you just mentioned comms there, whether that's what might be happening here, and we need to reinforce the message that there is a whistleblowing policy and people need to feel confident in being able to use it, and they will get a result when they use it.
And I'm wondering also, is there any parallel protection, if you like, for residents or members of the public who report?
So again, with those situations, we do everything we can to protect the fact the referral's been made in the first place, and then who it's been made by. So we do the same for whistleblowers, where we seek to protect their identity and the fact that whistleblowing allegations actually been made. So again, we offer, if people, the residents want to report things anonymously, we accept those referrals by phone through the website. We look to see where we can get contact details to go back if we've got more questions. That can help in many cases, but at the end of the day, we would not disclose in an investigation, even in a matter that goes to court, where a referral came from or who it came from. Really important we protect the identity of the individual who's raised it, because often if it's tenancy for a near neighbour, for example, it's really important that we treat that very seriously and confidentially.
And it's difficult as a counsellor when you get people coming to you in your surgery, for example, saying things, and then you say, well, what do you want me to do with this information? Oh, well, I don't need to do anything, I'm just telling you. Well, actually, unless you give me some details and allow me to use that, it's difficult to do anything about. It's about confidence, isn't it? It's about confidence and a certainty as much as you can. Those names will remain anonymous, yes. Andrew.
Right, Borough. So how do we compare against the other two councils? Would we see exactly the same report and the same sort of issues?
You see a similar report. Obviously, the data changes for each of the boroughs, the cases change for each borough. happy to get into.
Well, just think about it. We can take advantage of some learning.
Yeah, that's published for Westminster, on Westminster's Audit Committee and Hammersmith's Audit Committee as well. I'm happy to draw some information together which gives some comparison for
And the same people are doing the work in those.
and we have a team that's shared across Westminster and RBKC that investigates fraud for both boroughs. A separate team at Hammersmith. Andy actually heads up the service that runs across all three.
Well, I'm just interested to
Yeah.
see it better because I don't, it's very difficult. We've got benchmarks in here and said that this is a vector. So I remember when it was launched, we got a lot of publicity about it. Yeah, there was really positive feedback, but it was quite nice to benchmark and it's look at the nearest stock.
I mean, it gets some comparative data, so things like the number of the volume of housing stock in each borough as well. Tenancy frauds, for example.
Yeah, that's the first one. The second one is it would be nice if the is it Andy?
Yes, yeah.
It actually comes to our next meeting because you get a grit in this.
Yeah.
But then you could tell it's yes.
Apologies, I haven't got a grip with me this evening. Sorry.
It's no grit. Then does it?
No, he does.
Whoever the man is.
Andy
I know
Hyatt.
those things, yeah. Andy Hyatt.
Andy Hyatt, he comes, we have we drill into some
Yeah.
things, which
Yeah, policy
is helpful.
So in terms of this report, committee are requested to note it. And you noted it. Thank you. Let's move now to item number 6, which is the Treasury Management Report. The report provides an account of activities undertaken by the committee and who's going to present the okay. Thank you, Patrick. You're going to present this. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Good evening, committee. So this is a report you're quite familiar with. It's the sort of mid-year update on the treasury management activities. That's our sort of cash flow analysis, investment of cash or reserves, and then any borrowing activities that we undertake within the kind of economic environment that we're operating within. I'll take the report as largely read, but I'll just touch on a few points which I think are kind of important. So we've spoken in our previous updates about interest rates and the impact of that on our borrowing strategy right now, but also the expected yield on the investments. So interest rates are obviously high right now relative to the past sort of decade. And they're sort of expected to stay higher for longer. So inflation, you'll be aware, has come down and the figures are positive, better than expected. However, there's still strong consumer demand, and that's kind of leading into our Treasury advice Darling Post expecting the current base rate to remain at 5.25% for a longer period of time. So the implications of that for us mean that we still need to be vigilant in our borrowing strategy, look for opportunities when the cash flow requires that within the forecast capital program we're doing. It also has implications for the VNAV fund, which we've sort of spoken at length in the past about as well. But fortunately, until you see the rates dipping off at the tail end, you won't see the sort of price of the NAV coming back up. However, what it does mean is that as the various instruments within that fund mature, they're reinvested at a higher yield. The dividend on that is significantly better than it was last year, and that yield is increasing as well. However, the current value of that is the same as last time we met, by and large. Only other things sort of touch on, you'll note, as happens, this is now November, and the report was done at the end of September. So time has passed, there's been some sort of changes that you will note just from the numbers in the report. One to talk about is the deposit with North Lanarkshire Council. That has, of course, matured since the report was published. And that money has simply just gone into money market fund investments at a higher yield. So the average of those roughly about 5.3%. And of course, it allows that instant liquidity, so it allows us to manage our cash flow a lot better. Additionally, when the report went out, there was no new borrowing, but we did speak last time about the need to borrow within our forecast because of the capital program, and the strategy that we're implementing for that, constantly watching out for rates to drop to a favourable position relative to what they've been. Incredibly volatile in the gilt yields. Some days you'll see movements in the gilt yield by 30, 40 basis points, and then the next day it'll drop back down again. So it's really tough to time that, but we have taken a couple of borrowing tranches of 20 million each. That's split between the general fund and the HRA, and they were carried out in October and November. At that sort of 7 to 10 year time frame, where the yield curve was kind of at its most favourable. So that ranged between 4.65% in the HRA and just over 5% for the general fund. So yeah, as suggested last time, we're looking out for those opportunities, and the cash flow forecast, again with the capital program spend, suggests that there is potential the need for additional tranches, and again we'll be looking at the opportune moments to take that borrowing. Finally, just to touch on again the local authority deposits. Obviously, there's one left now waiting to mature, which will happen next month. There's been concern expressed in the past around around the security of these deposits. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that because Birmingham obviously happened, which was big news, and that might have brought that question back into the forefront of your mind. So just a few key points on that to hopefully give you the assurance that these deposits are secure. Fully expect to have those returned back to us. So anyone that had a deposit with Birmingham, which we did not, but they're a good one to talk about, the risk of losing any money at that point was very low. They not only do they have the PWLB for refinancing to refinance at the point of the maturity and then obviously pay back the deposit. There is Section 13 of the Local Government Act 2003, which actually secures any loans made to a local authority on the revenues of that authority. So you're actually secured against the tax raising powers of that authority, which is why we haven't seen any default into local lending. A useful kind of contrast to make is relative to in the banking sector. So Greensill Bank in 2021 could not meet its liabilities, and the losses to German municipalities were estimated to be as high as 500 million euros. Insolvency procedures still ongoing, so the exact amount isn't known. But contrast that with local authorities, where we've seen a number of Section 114 notices being issued. There's a lot of focus on that in the media, and that obviously raises just questions around and concerns around any future lending that might happen within the local authority market. It's probably the case that our cash flow doesn't allow those investments right now anyway. However, if it does, we will continue to carry out our due diligence process in the same way that we do, and look to make those deals where possible, because we also have an interest in maintaining and ensuring the continuation of this short-term market that happens between local authorities, where we can actually get very favourable rates for short-term borrowing as well, which we obviously as an authority want to be able to dip into as well. So it is in our interest to understand the security of these deposits, but within the correct processes and the advice from our Treasury advisor. I just wanted to touch on that as well, given that Birmingham came up and it's been of concern in the past. So that's everything I wanted to touch on. So I'll open up to any
Just on those local authority investments that are maturing. The paragraphs are going to be distorted there, but what are we going to do with that money when it matures?
Same thing again. I think we'll just roll that into our money market funds in the meantime, so that we've got that liquidity. And if within our cash flow forecasts we deem it's suitable to lend for a fixed period of time, we'll consider looking at other either fixed term deposits with banks or other interlocal authority lending. But in the immediate maturity period, it'll just roll into our money market funds.
Yeah, thank you.
Andrew's first.
Andrew.
Thank you for that. Can we go back to the NAB fund?
Yep.
So I'm just going to table page 86. So there's a capital and income yield. The income yield is nothing. Is that correct?
That's why I didn't understand.
Why is it nothing?
Yeah, so the 5.5,
Yeah.
paragraph 5.5 is where we show that. It's
Sorry, how could it be 825 for the half year, and then 4.599 million for the year?
Can you just start again on it?
Sorry.
I need to know.
Yeah.
so budgeted returns on external investment is 5.2 million. That's looking at our whole treasury book, and then the table below is looking only at the short dated corporate bond fund. So separating out the 2 points within that paragraph, you have 825k for the first half of the year. It's down to a number of things. Rates are just a little slow to carry through. So money market funds, where the bulk of these investments are held, typically have a 3-month time lag.
Hold on, stop. Can we just talk about this one deposit, one investment,
Yeah.
22 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you put in your table on page 86, there's a
Yeah, we just.
zero yield on that. Is that right or not? The income yield.
There's not a zero yield on it. That's
So why is it law? What's not 0.00%?
It's because it's a dividend. Is that right?
it's paid out as a dividend distribution. Yeah.
So that's
But we're not getting any distributions from
Coupon
it.
payment.
I think we are.
We do. Yes.
You here. This is what it's 5.5. This is what I don't understand.
So 5.5. That's the table there, are the distributions from the BNAV fund.
Just pause for a minute. 5.5.
It was on page 82.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how much? And
I
where?
don't understand.
5.5.
5.5. I thought it was 5.5.
So
Also,
We're getting in the bubble.
4.2 that says NA, the weighted average return.
the BNAV confuses the yield on all of the other investments, so we removed it out of that
Because it's a
in order
dividend.
to show it
Yeah.
as
Where
as
is it?
its own self. And so the actual distributions coming from the BNAV fund is shown in the table at the bottom of paragraph 5.5.
Can we just make sure that the headings
Yes.
tie in throughout? Because it just makes it very confusing to follow through.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So we've had two distributions that put 450,000 back.
That's correct.
Right. And then there's been a change in the underlying capital value.
The underlying capital value hasn't shifted very much throughout the year because the significant drop came as rates rose rapidly. But if you compare the distributions to previous reports, you'll note that they have gradually increased, and that's due to the time lag in instruments within the fund maturing, being reinvested at the higher rates. So the
Right, okay. So I think what I'm coming to as a question is, at what point do we decide we cut our losses on that investment and reinvest it somewhere else? Or or yes, to hold it, continue to hold it in the investment? Is there a trigger point that we pay threshold that we don't want to go through and consider reinvesting that money elsewhere?
This investment was originally made as a diversifier and as a medium term, but longer term investment. So the money market fund is where we draw on for that instant liquidity and the cash flow purposes. And the Beano fund at the time was there to try and generate a little bit of yield. You remember the rates were at nearly 0%. So that was when you bring in duration, you can get higher returns. This is sort of
We tie it up for longer.
exactly. Now that's what the fund invests in is fixed term deposits with bonds, short term, but the duration of those could be up to 3 years. So, I mean, in short, the answer to your question really is, I think as we've discussed in the past as well, we expect that as the bank rate drops down and relative yields on the
Yeah, I just wonder if that's a moving piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
We thought that rates were going to come down quicker and sooner,
yes.
quicker than they currently are. At some one point, do we stand back and say this may have merits, but it's a poor performing part of our portfolio, and we sell off, get out of it, and put the money elsewhere? I just want to know where the threshold is really. Like we've talked about, you remember discussions, and so we may have had a good strategy 3 years ago, but there was a different interest rate environment. We've got some changing news, haven't we, about interest rates and how long they're going to be higher than previously said. I'll ask you the question is when did we evaluate that particular investment?
Constantly.
And is there a mechanism to do so?
I think we do constantly evaluate it, and I don't think now is the time to sell because rates are likely to fall longer term. So rates aren't going to fall soon, is the advice we're getting, but the advice we're also getting is that in the longer term they are expected to fall.
What do you mean by longer term?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, get a group of economists together, you'll get a lot of different answers when you put sort of presentation today talking about 2025, 2026, the rates will start to fall. And I think that's in line with what Arlene Close are telling us, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, they're only estimates.
September next year, it's first rate cut wouldn't get in place. It's a valid question, and it is one that we continue to consider.
Can we give it a slightly more exact answer? And I know it's a moving feast and there's lots of active, but I guess Andrew's point is how active are we in managing this? How often do we review our whether we sell or keep or whatever? Just give us a bit more reassurance that we have an idea of what the threshold is and how active we are.
We meet with Arlene Close regularly who give us an update on this and advise us on that. There's two parts of performance to this. One is the distribution yield, which actually at this point, and I can send the exact figures through after the meeting, but they actually are performing in line with other investments. Because again, there's a time lag there because the other instruments within the funds have to mature, but when they do mature, they're being reinvested at that sort of 5% mark, or short dated bonds 3 years in excess of 5%. So actually the yield there is good. Where the poor performance is in that actual underlying value of the fund and asset value. If we sell that now, we crystallize that loss. So, however, the loss came off the back of a sharp rise in interest rates, and it's been pretty stable now for at least 12 months. And then before that, it sort of dropped down over 6 months, but it hasn't really changed in the past 12 months. So I think we can be fairly confident that we're not going to see, unless we see another huge spike in interest rates off the back of where base rate is now, we're not going to see any significant further movements down on the NAV price. But what we will see is a continued increase in the distributions, on the yield on the distributions, which matches that broadly in line with other available investments at the moment. But the real benefit to us is that, again, those instruments are up to sort of 3 years. So because they're buying security, fixed term securities.
Money market funds giving 5.3%.
Yes.
So why do we have this money tied up, not giving us anything near that?
The distribution yield is close to that. I'll confirm the exact figures with you.
How can it be? Because it's 400,000.
Because there's a lag in so the distributions are coming in off of instruments that are still tied in at that, because again, some of these could be 2 years ago, right, in that low interest rate environment. So the yield on that is going to be really low. But as they mature, you reinvest it at the sort of 5.5% that a 2-year security might be paying. So then, because of that time lag, you see the increase in the distribution yield come through. Money market funds are even more short dated, so they have a time lag of 3 months. So there was a period there as well where you might be invested in money market funds, but you could be locking into fixed interest with a bank deposit, and you'd get 30 basis points more. But 3 months on, it would catch up. This is the same thing, but it's happening on a longer time scale.
So we're losing money.
Well, right now, if you look at it like that, but what we're trying to do is look at it over the medium term, and where we gain is where we've locked in, say, 5.5%, and then money market funds are only paying 3.5%, which is what is expected to happen as rates drop off. Now, big question there is, of course, when did rates drop off? And I don't think there's anyone that can really answer that with any degree of certainty. But the advice that we're getting is rates start to drop off from September next year.
Okay, Tara, you were, yeah.
I had a couple of questions. Arlene Close obviously has advised you. Do you ever get anybody else advising you? I mean, you totally relying on them. I mean, is there any value in getting a second opinion?
We can look at getting a second opinion.
Obviously, that'll cost you, but sometimes it's such an important and expensive decision that it might be worth looking at that. It's not my field, but
Yeah, they share other people's advice as well, don't they?
and
So
also,
that's the main
the other
thing.
thing I was going to say was that obviously we put quite a lot of our total portfolio in this fund, which obviously hasn't performed that well. I presume we're going to learn the lesson, because you said we were doing it to diversify, but in a way, putting some 45% of your portfolio in one thing sort of sounds not very diversified.
No, you're absolutely right. At the time, it wouldn't have been quite so high because cash balances were a lot higher. I don't know what the exact figure is off the top of my head, but it would have been in excess of, I think, 100 million at that time. And then there were a number of payments that went out for capital program and Grenfell related payments as well, which significantly reduced it quite
The
quickly.
denominator went down.
So I'm going to draw, we're going to come to here, but draw close to, because we can chat about this. Any information that's not on here that you would like to see in a report that give you more confidence or more details around the questions you're asking?
I suppose I guess it's less than clear to me why we continue to hold that investment, but it's not the role of this committee to say, to decide on which investments to have. But what we're looking for is some assurance that elsewhere that evaluation is being done. Testing whether it's also difficult, isn't it? You buy something, it loses money, and you think, well, we'll keep on. Yeah. We also know that sort of weakness. So I don't think it's my role to say whether there's a better way of investing the money, but to ask and get assurance that there is somebody or doing just that. And there is an objective evaluation, because it's sometimes difficult to distance yourself, isn't it, from a decision you made.
Yeah.
And it will crystallise loss, but that may be actually the right thing to do. So all I can ask for is that we see perhaps next report that there has been a proper evaluation of it and write something up about it,
Yeah.
and include in that who's made judgments in the decisions. We see the process working.
Yeah. I think what I'll do is get Royal London to, as far as they possibly can. I mean, it can be a confidential report, so as far as they can, give us a breakdown of the actual underlying investments.
Yeah.
That way you could, and hopefully you could see the maturity date and the yield of a significant part of that portfolio that's got a low yield, bringing down the average yield. But then also the reinvestments that have happened in the past 6 months at the higher yield, I think would help to illustrate that potential at the tail end of interest rates.
Yeah.
And then of course it's a bit of a putting faith in forecasts to actually come to fruition and rates to drop off. However, I think we can, understanding how the valuation of sort of short dated bonds works, and expecting rates to at least not spike in the way that they did, because that caught everyone off guard, and that's why we saw a £2.5 million loss before we could even do anything about it, because it happened within such a short period of time.
Okay, so there's a bit of extra work, information
Yeah.
we could have next time that would just add a bit of clarity. I'm conscious we spent quite a bit of time, just I haven't asked any quick questions here or anything. Patrick, thank you for that. You see, our members take a keen interest in this, and thank you for that. And it'll be useful to have that bit more information next time.
Absolutely. It probably is the case that you don't need to wait until next time as well. I can look at pulling this together and get it sent out to you sooner than then, because that would be June next year.
Okay, well, if that's a piece of work that can be done fairly straightforward, then that would be useful.
Yeah, I'll ask the question of Royal London.
We live in a time when things are changing all the time, and what made sense 6 months ago might not make sense now. It's good to know why it didn't then and doesn't now.
Can I just ask, who makes the decision? Is it the executive leadership? Is it your team? Who decides?
Well, our team really, I would ultimately, in line with the policy that we've got. So, but we would on this be waiting for, be looking for a recommendation to sell it, to make us make that decision really. And that isn't the advice that we're getting at the moment, but this report can try and explain why that is. But it's a combination of the potential growth and the yield and the expected increase in yield. But as has been said, it does depend on the interest rate environment, which we can't be certain of. But all the every economist I've seen is in line with what Audit Close is saying. I mean, there isn't. That's the consensus of opinion that there will come a point in a year or so's time when rates will start to fall, which makes sense because obviously inflation has fallen considerably. So I think we can expect that to happen.
The 3-year clock is meant to expire when? And the 3 years, when was it invested? 2021, 22?
Well, they'll be staggered.
Yes.
So
but when would be the first 3 years?
I think this was maybe a year before I started, roughly. So we might be in our final year of that 3-year cycle. However, you could have had some maturities happen right at the point before rates started to rise and catch up. So you could have, sort of another maybe 2 years, say, on some of those lower yielding instruments. It just depends on the weight of those, but that's what I hope to get. That's the information I hope to get from Royal London and show you.
Okay, Thank you very much. So we note that and now move on to item number 7, which compliance with SIPA Financial Management Code. This code sets out the standards of financial management for local authorities, designed to support good practice in financial management and to assist local authorities in demonstrating their financial sustainability. So, Amanda, you're going to present this, please. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as it explains, this report provides an update on the council's compliance with the financial management
Speak
code.
a little louder because the room echoes and we need to broadcast it. Just a bit
Yeah,
louder.
okay. So this report provides an update on the council's compliance with the SIPA Financial Management Code. The code sets out the standards of financial management for all local authorities, and it's designed to support good practice in financial management and to assist us with demonstrating financial sustainability. It's the third review to be undertaken since the introduction of the code. The outcome of the 21-22 compliance report was presented to the committee in July last year. And the overall assessment was that the council was compliant in many areas, but some actions were put in place to address areas of partial compliance. And an update on this is included in Appendix 1 of this report. In Appendix 2, there's also a statement on compliance following the 22-23 review. The overall review showed that the council was compliant in almost all areas, but not in 2 areas where we were just partially compliant, and some actions are set up in this report to explain that. There are 6 principles forming part of the code, and these are covered within 7 standards and 17 subsections. And again, these are set out in Appendix 4. So, as I said, the overall assessment demonstrates that the council is compliant with the code, apart from 2 areas where we are just partially compliant. And these are, so under Chapter 3, medium to long-term financial management.
Page.
So, sorry, page 19. The table on page 19 sets out the 2 areas where we have partially compliant. So, Chapter 3, Section F, which is the first section of the table, the authority has carried out a credible and transparent financial resilience assessment. We have partially achieved there. And the action for improvement is that we will include locally defined and off-log performance indicators in our quarterly financial monitoring reports. We started to do this in Q1 of this financial year. The second area where we have partially achieved is in relation to stakeholder engagement and business cases. And the standard here is that the council uses an appropriate documented options appraisal methodology to determine the value for money of its decisions. The action to demonstrate improvement here is that revenue implications for capital projects will be included in quarterly monitoring reports, along with an indication of whether these are fully resourced or unbudgeted. That's the second section of the table item. And again, this is in progress, and it's something that is now being addressed as part of the capital review. So to conclude, the outcome of the review is that we are confident that the council has robust financial management processes in place that either meet or exceed all of the minimum standards contained in the code.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions, and then I'll throw it open. Para 6.1, yeah, which is your conclusion. And then really going back to para 4.4, do our external auditors comment on this, or is this purely internal? I mean, do they see it? Do they comment on it, or is it really us totally sort of marking our own homework sort of thing?
It's purely internal. However, we have to provide assurance as part of the annual governance statement, which is.
And they look at that, don't they, when they, yes, yeah. And also, can we do our meetingly update on DLUC? Para 63 mentions it, it's worth just giving updates to where we are on that, please.
Sorry.
6.3, so this, capitalisation directive.
Yeah.
Who's going to, and these are not.
Yeah, so as we spoke about previously, SIPRA have come in and done the review that they needed to undertake. They've submitted their documentation to DLUC. That then needs to go on to the Treasury. Mike contacted DLUC last week, and they advised us that it had been delayed slightly with the change of ministers. So we're still waiting to hear the outcome of our capitalisation direction request at this stage.
And then that means that has a knock-on effect on our accounts we spoke about at the last meeting.
That's correct,
Is
yeah.
there any, it's points asking, isn't it? Is there any indication when?
I'm afraid I really cannot say. They just said it had been delayed in their response back to us last week. We will keep chasing them.
Yeah.
It does mean that the 21, 22 and 22, 23 accounts remain open, as we discussed previously.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Liz?
Yeah, sorry, I'm sure this is all been concluded fine, and thank you very much for everything you've done on it. But I just had some issues with tying in the 21-22 progress update when there were so many points outstanding, when it says things like nothing has been formally progressed, this is being redesigned, council is developing this, and then it's not picked up in the 22-23 year, and yet they're all signed off as fine, and only two things partially. Do you follow me?
Yes, so the progress update comments on actions, as you said, from the 21 and 22 compliance statement, and where actions haven't been fully addressed, there is a reference in the progress update section to say where these are included as part of a new action. Because something
in the 22-23 report, and I couldn't find them all. I mean, I'm pulling my hair out and nothing to sort, so I just found some gaps that I couldn't find, and things saying, you know, this hasn't been progressed and it's signed off for the next year.
I think, so just one example, taking the first one in the progress update, chapter 1 and reference 2, plans to develop the new spend mapping tool are still in the scoping phase. That's part of the progress update. And that's also in section 1A of the 22-23
Appendix 2, right? But they're not all, they haven't all got that reference. Okay, I can see that those have got the reference, and I put a big tick there, but I've got others where I haven't got a tick. I've got a process to review will be, but for 24-25, the council is aiming to improve this further, and I can't see those picked up.
So this is looking at 21, 22, appendix 1.
Yeah.
And appendix 2 is looking at 22, 23.
Yeah.
So you'll see them picked up in 23, 24. In appendix 1, where they're not referenced, that means they've been completed. So chapter 1.
But 21, 22, they're not been picked up in.
They should be
So
picked up in the
they've
next
been
year.
completed. They're not picked up in the following year. Correct, isn't it?
If they have been completed, they're not picked up.
They've been completed.
But why are they saying that they're outstanding?
No, we're not saying they're all outstanding in appendix 1.
Well, they say it will be, is to be undertaken. Sorry, I mean, it's throughout. I mean, I've got a whole list of them here. M1, for instance, on page 99. And that's throughout. And you've got L1, the 24, 25, the council. I suppose that's is aiming to improve this further, but then you're signing off 22, 23, not picking that up. What I'm worried about is if we lose that.
I think those where we are yet to take the action required have a reference to the statement in appendix 2. Everything else has been achieved, but there are still things we can do to add further value.
I think then this is a question of presentation, isn't it? And can we request, we're not going to solve it tonight.
No.
Can we request, if this committee is slightly confused or not able to follow stuff through, it needs to be looked at, and can you look at the presentation and almost be much more deliberate in this has been achieved.
Yes.
We've achieved the minimum standard. We are seeking to go over and beyond that. Just to get that real clarity in it.
We'll do that when we present it the next year. We'll make sure that we cover both years
Both
going.
years, because otherwise it just looks like there are, just things outstanding.
Well, it is misleading, isn't it? As two
Two things.
things
You've
that
got
are not
all this,
achieved
yeah.
in the current year when there are partially completed or not completed things being brought forward.
I think, completely take your point. We'll make sure that all of the items are really clearly referenced in the next report. I would say that because there are still areas where we are saying work can be done to improve things, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are not compliant. We're demonstrating.
Well, again, I think we are compliant in this. However, we are seeking to.
We are still.
Yeah.
You can always go further and show
Yeah,
that compliance.
That's good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's got it.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One is on the 21-22 report, page 93, C5, D3. Director's assurance statements. I found myself looking at this going, they're being reviewed annually, internally, and is that it? And actually, is that sufficient? Or indeed, should they be asked to be refreshed? Or at what stage? Why is it only annually? And again, where judge and jury?
So good practice is that we actually get each director to look at a whole series of activities in their area, annually sign off on their compliance assurance and the source of assurance they have. We've used that in the past, and we still use it to feed the annual governance statement. What we do with some directors, and we're working around each of them, is to look at how we can review elements of the director's assurance statement on a more regular basis. But it is an annual assessment that feeds into the annual governance statement.
And then my second question is page 103, commercial assurance channel. Please explain that. How often does it meet?
So that's an officer panel that meets every fortnight, and it looks at all of the decisions that are being proposed to be taken in relation to procurement strategies, contract awards over the key decision threshold. That's chaired by the head of procurement or myself, and also has representatives from legal, finance, and other areas who then look at the reports that are coming forward in draft. They then make comments to improve them, and they look to endorse them, and then they go on to the decision makers to take the decision.
So how is that different from the capital programme?
So the capital programme board is looking at the actual capital projects,
Yeah.
whereas the commercial assurance panel is looking at individual procurements, which may be capital, maybe different.
The capital programme board only looks at capital schemes. And they may report back to CAP. So if CAP is looking at where we want to generally purchase something, whereas the capital programme board looks at everything in the capital programme.
So typically,
That's not going to CAP.
yes, typically a scheme will be through the capital programme group first, because it has to be agreed as part of the capital programme. When officers then get to a point when they want to procure the works to build or to do the project, then the procurement strategy will come to the commercial assurance panel, and the contract award, once they've done the tender and the evaluation, will come to the commercial assurance panel to make the decision.
Just while we're on capital programme, page 94, paragraph 5. The slippage on capital programme has been an annual issue that we discuss on it. Are we saying this is now going to get better? Because we do our accounts every year have often found quite an issue around slippage. And it's difficult to know if some of these projects are going over 2 or 3 years, and if it's difficult to track which years are slipping and is it still slipping, where are we? So is it going to improve?
I hope so. So the capital programme board is a lot more
a lot more rigor around it now. So when a scheme enters the capital programme has a lot more rigor, the profiling of that spend as well. So we're trying to put that rigor in with programme managers to understand when it's ready to go live, because obviously we don't want to borrow any monies in advance and when we need to as well. So can't promise, but we're hoping that that work, and certainly the board is quite rigorous, looking at what the capital programme will look like as we move forward. We're obviously in early stages of it yet, so we've got to carry on that development.
And to what extent can they, so there's one thing about accounting for it, and to what extent can they actually get into the project and say, hey, come on, how are you managing this project? Why is it not happening? What powers have they got on
The
that?
boards can ask all those questions. They call in programme managers. Mike is one of the co-chairs of the board alongside Dan Portfield, who is one of our other executive directors. And there are a number of officers from both the finance team, planning, the property team as well, who sit on that board. So they've got the, and there's obviously the new capital programme office as well that we've set up. So they've got that mandate to ask them if there's questions.
Do you know why the slippage takes place? Is it was a time to put things on contract or target the builders or what?
So I think slippage is quite historic. It's the same.
Same everywhere.
Yeah,
central
absolutely.
government.
But I think probably the rigour wasn't quite as great around timing, so people put it all up front, felt they got it and then slipped it. There's also, we must recognise there's been COVID, there's also been delays in some, particularly steel, getting hold of some of the materials, also actually getting, yes, thank you, getting people to actually come and undertake the work has been quite difficult as well recently. So there's a number of things that have created slippage, and I'm not saying there will never be any slippage again, because I'm sure there will. Some of it also is that.
But it's, I accept your point, but there was a problem with slippage before COVID, before the shortages. And this is going back quite historic. So it's good to see that board is there. And one would like to think in a year, 2 or 3 years' time, we won't be seeing the sort of slippage figures we've seen historically.
And I think we have involved, I think we've always managed the finances of it fairly well. Very well, actually. But it's the delivery on the ground that makes us less. So that's all the focus has been on, in setting up the capital programme office, in property and social investment department, and in Dan Hawthorne becoming more involved, because I suppose in the end, we were perhaps over managing it from an accountant's a kind of finance point of view rather than a delivery point of view. And we've had to focus more on that delivery.
Okay, any final comments on that?
Can I just ask one quick one? Thank you. On page 90, this table of the areas for improvement where compliance is partially achieved. In chapter 5, where we have N, the options, appraisal methodology to determine the value for money. In terms of then the sort of areas for improvement, that relates specifically to capital delivery. And I'm wondering, can we say from this report that we are compliant outside of capital in terms of value for money processes?
Yeah, I think we can do that because we are conducting all of the necessary appraisals, and we're fully reporting on that in the
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like the committee to note that report, and thank you, Amanda, for presenting that. Thank you. Move on now to item number 8, the corporate safety report. And I think we're going to prepare that on here. The corporate health and safety report. The purpose of protecting the health, safety and welfare of the council's workforce, including members, temporary and agency staff, and anyone whose health and safety might be affected by the council's work. So I'd like to ask Ian, Head of Corporate Safety and Workplace, to present the report, please.
Actually, I'm going to pass it on to Sean Allen, who's the corporate health. and
Thank you.
safety
Your
manager.
report, your presentation is excellent. Thank you very much.
so much. Always a pleasure.
Right, so, yeah, the report is an annual report for 22-23. Although it begins with an overview of our department and government structure, it actually includes input and updates from a range of teams across councils. Includes, so apart from the corporate health and safety team, it's fire safety colleagues, it's the housing management health and safety team, the workplace team, and corporate property. So we have lots of input into this. So it starts with an update from the corporate assurance and building safety group, which includes work related to the Building Safety Act and RAC concrete, so reinforced waterproof erected concrete. And then it follows on to an update from our fire safety advisor, including work on fire risk assessments, evacuation plan reviews, fire protection in our museum, and risks from electric vehicles, which is the principal update on. We then have a section on work we're doing on council safety, which includes training, which runs twice a year, and content, details on the content of the trainings given as well. We have an update on the new facilities management contracts that we're working on, and also on security management issues that we're facing, and updates that are coming up, including the new terrorism detection of premises bill. Following that, we've got some specific highlights on work streams we have at the moment. So there's enhancements to first aid provisions, housing management 5-star accreditation, which is good news for housing management on their occupational safety and health management systems, RAC in schools specifically, and work we're doing around occupational violence, which we see a lot of in our incident data. And moving on to incident data, we've got a few headlines to pull out from that for the year. One being a 41% increase in reports received from the previous year. Over 50% increase in reports of violence, abuse and harassment, which obviously is not what we want to see. Incidents resulting in injury have reduced though from 35% to 29% of the total. And the most common cause of injury is slip, trips, falls, which is very common in a lot of injuries, not surprised really, but something we're going to be looking into a bit about that. Lastly, there's progress against a lot of the previous year's commitments, and then the 8 new targets for this year, which we report on and monitor at the corporate safety board meetings every quarter.
Super, thank you very much, Sean. Questions from committee, comments?
Yeah, just on page 136 on the housing management, you had an audit with an experienced independent auditor and had a 5-star audit, which was very good. Who was the experienced independent auditor? And also, I heard that the audit only lasted 3 days. I've been an auditor. I've never done an audit in 3 days.
So, yeah, I think the auditor was from the British Safety Council, I believe. It was managed by and organised by the Housing Management Health and Safety Team. So I might be wrong here, but I believe it was by the British Safety Council. They organised the auditor.
It was.
And I think it was only a few days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they looked at the organisational arrangements just within housing management, but where arrangements are fed in from corporate policy, for example, they looked at those as well.
So if I can just add to that, yeah, the process involves it's one of the products that British Safety Council offers in terms of helping organisations improve their safety standard. And so what it involves is that the organisation will produce a submission to the British Safety Council audit team ahead of the process, and then they come in and spend 3 days interviewing people and so on. So it's not the whole thing. It's 3 days of on-site work as a follow-on to the submission.
So it's more like a review.
The employer makes. Yes, that's right. That's right.
3 days.
I presume they're reviewing quite a lot of the information you've given them as well. Yes. Thank you. Jordan?
Task, and also on page 136, you talk about first aid. I appreciate that lots of people are still working from home. And I want to know how, firstly, have we got enough coverage every day of the week? And how does somebody know that if you've got a particular floor, that is where you will find the one that's in, and that the one is in, there's one in covering every day. You know, what is the mechanism for anybody who needs it? Because if you need first aid, it's usually an emergency.
So first and foremost, we have the front of house staff and security staff all first aid trained. So there's a base of first aiders. They're always around, they're always here, and front of house staff are here when staff are in the building and security staff are here 24/7, I understand. So we have those in place. In terms of staff, hybrid working has been quite a tricky thing for us to navigate with that. So I recently did a survey with just the staff who have been trained in the last 3 years to figure out, identify exactly where they're based, roughly how many days per week they are at that location. And so I looked at Kensington Town Hall to start with, and what we came up with was more coverage than I thought there would be. So I can't necessarily say that, you know, there's someone on each floor every day of the week, but we do have a lot of staff who are saying they're here 4 days a week, 5 days a week, who are trained. So we've got that assurance on top of the base, which is front of house and security. But in sort of other locations where there's small teams operating, you know, outside of the main buildings, there is the responsibility of the manager or head of service, whoever it may be, to sort of make sure there's a system in place that ensures someone is around, or if you've got staff on site, at least someone is trained, or if the risk is low enough that at least there's a first aid kit there, which we should have anyway. So we're quite assured that we're not leaving any massive gaps or massive risk in that sense.
So how does an individual on the floor know who the first aid is?
That's something we're looking to improve on again. So hoping to change, we've got posters up at the moment around calling front desk, I believe, and this kind of a system that's been in place for a while. But what I want to have is new posters with names and numbers. So using the survey results like recently, we've got some in draft. They're just waiting to be basically printed and laminated. We're going to get them up around this building initially. So that will, and also lanyards. I'm hoping to get lanyards that have the usual logos on, but also are green, and we'll have a first aid sign on. So if you're walking around the building, you don't know anyone, you can spot first aid on from, you know, across the room. So yeah,
I'm very confident that managers within the department are managing that they know who's, you know, when people are working from home or who's coming in what days of the week, they have got a coverage. I know it's not easy.
It's actually much more of a challenge than it used to be with hybrid working. But what we do through the corporate safety board, we ask each division, each directorate to provide an annual report every year and to do update reports for us. And that's one of the issues we ask them to provide assurance on. So they will be making those reports through corporate safety board, either confirming or otherwise that we've got that kind of coverage. As far as, I mean, if it were a statutory question, if you said to me, you know, are we in line with the law? Yes, we are. We are in line with the law, because the law is actually not particularly strong on the issue around first aid at work. So I would say, you know, we are beyond what the law requires us to be. But it is a much more challenging thing, and it's exercising us quite a lot in terms of getting it sorted out. But it's going to be an ongoing process.
Going through HR would actually be a useful word as well, when it comes from different directions.
We're working with them in order to kind of map out who we've got in which directorate, who we've got in each team, because I think there is still a thing, I think, with HR where people get paid a bit more if they're a designated first aider, so they get an extra a small uplift on their salary. So we're working with them.
Be in the office a bit.
Yes, actually, that's an interesting one, isn't it? If you're getting paid, actually,
yeah,
below this bin.
And the challenge always is, you know, who's in the office and when, because, you know, we've decided as an organisation to make it so that people can have some agency over that decision. And but then, you know, if we look at it in a statistical sense, if there are fewer people in the office, then there are fewer people who might need first aid support as well. So if you cut down by 50%, you've got 50% of the need for first aid, theoretically, as well. I'm touching wood as I say that, because but looking at it clearly, statistically,
Quite, I mean, anyway,
statistically,
okay,
thank you.
As President, two others in this report. There's the rise of violence against staff. And secondly, there's the electric vehicles and the whole concern, particularly since the town hall is built on a car park. And do you want to talk about what you're looking at doing to address those?
So I'll say first of all the rise in violence, and I did make some notes actually in terms of the numbers. The increase in violent incidents, as a health and safety professional, the usual position is underreporting. But the common position in our profession is that there is underreporting, particularly when there's not physical injury. And so on one level, when I look at these figures, I'm encouraged that people are experiencing an issue when somebody is aggressive or violent or unpleasant towards them, and they're still taking the time, they're still making the effort to do what we have been asking them to do, and that's to sit down and write the report and get it logged, so that we can then, as an organisation, we can look at what measures are in place to help them to manage violence and aggression, to reduce the incidence of it. So on the one hand, there is an encouragement to be drawn from that. And we've been working really hard with the security contractor to provide support from them. We've been working hard with the teams that do meet and greet and deal face to face with the residents and with people who come in needing help. I mean, we've got, I think you said there was something like 11,000 face to face interactions in the report, and that's just down to the customer service centre. And I just had some information today. We've got nearly 375,000 telephone interactions with residents over the year. You know, over 1/3 interactions with residents. So actually, these numbers in that sense are quite small in terms of a percentage of the contacts we have with people. But I'm encouraged in a way that we're getting those reports through, and I'm encouraged by the fact that we've got a reduction. It seems like a low number of reduction. There's only injury accidents down from 35 to 29%, but that is, that's a fair chunk off. That's a more than 10% reduction in the proportion of injury to non-injury accidents as well. So there is an encouragement to be drawn from the fact that people are reporting when things go wrong, but not when they're injured. We're becoming more an organisation that will look at when things go wrong, even if someone hasn't been hurt, and try to head off those accidents and those assaults then, rather than wait until somebody has been physically assaulted. Electric vehicles. That's a much tougher issue to deal with, because guidance from the Fire Prevention Association, from London Fire Brigade, is catching up with a very fast moving emergence of the risk and a very quick introduction of these problems. What we are doing is remaining committed to not doing it until we know we can do it safely. But of course, there is a conflict, if you like, between us wanting to be an organisation that uses electric vehicles and that embraces the change over to electric vehicles very readily, but also an organisation that understands that it needs to be probably doing a bit more than most in terms of fire safety too. So it is a struggle, and it's going to remain to be a struggle. But we're keeping an eye very closely on it.
One of the challenges, we don't know the state of the vehicle that's attached to our buildings to a plug, and we've had examples. Okay, this is on social housing where people plug things into the corridors and the walkways, and you don't know the standard of the plug, you don't know the standard of the lead, and you don't know the standard of the. I'm thinking of one in my own mobility scooter. It was plugged in every night by someone's front door, and there was
and there have been issues with e-bikes and e-scooters as well. Those things are really causing us some concerns. But the fire safety team, certainly in the housing department, I know the fire safety team are working very, very hard on that. So.
Okay, any more?
Are people allowed to have e-bikes and scooters in high-rise blocks?
At the moment, I believe they are, and information.
Terrifying in some ways.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but I know that
Rules that are coming in, and they're allowing these in the, you've got to get FD30 doors and all sorts of things, and then they're allowing these electric combustible.
Yes, and I guess it's, when we say allowing, they are allowed, that yes, they are allowed in, but they've happened over time, more people have e-bikes now than they have before, and these number of apparatus is growing, isn't it? Types of apparatus is growing. Any more questions, please?
I really wondered whether something like the town hall, there should be a fireproof cabinet where people park e-bikes or e-scooters. I don't know if that's in our control, but I'm very conscious that we're sitting above.
sure, absolutely. We are looking at that. We have been looking at that
It was Luton Airport, wasn't
very recently.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Yes.
it? We were about that whole time.
Yeah.
It's not just the e-bikes. That's the.
Well, we're in line with other councils.
Yes. So,
Let's talk about housing fund or replacement programme. I know that councillor Henson will probably mention it if you were here. Are we kind of up to speed and we're not kind of falling behind on that?
As I understand it, yes, then that's reported through the corporate assurance on building safety group by Doug Goldring, the director of housing management.
And again, the risk-based, as we've talked about before, the committee risk-based approach has been taken to all the high-rise, high-risk buildings have been done first. And then the street properties and the low-rise buildings. So it's very targeted, focused, risk-based approach. And the contractors are in place to do this last phase of working through any plan when they might. Absolutely.
We have a paper that is coming to the housing scrutiny community select committee tomorrow, which Claire had chairs, and perhaps that might be shared with all of us.
Absolutely.
so committee, we do need to approve this, so can I ask if the committee is happy to approve this report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's the autumn.
Thank you, Sean and Ian, for your presentation. We now move to item number 9, which is our action track and forward programme. I've allocated 4 hours for this item, knowing how we normally go on this.
It's got colour.
Who would like to raise any observations or questions on this tracker? It's getting better.
It's getting better. Too many outstanding items, 3 items in the outstanding actions that could be moved. And yeah, it just needs to be kept up to date and moved.
And Lisa and I have agreed we will do that for a review and send out with draft minutes.
Yeah, actually, the first one, number 50, the disaggregation, what's the timing on that?
So this was, sorry.
So this was, it was just more for information, David, rather than to do with this. On that, this.
So the aggregation of the services, so we had a fibre service with Westminster.
Yeah.
So that disaggregation has been completed. There have been some change in the cybersecurity team, so what we'll do is make sure we get a briefing sorted out for you on cyber risk between now and the next meeting. That's really important. We do that. We talk about it as an informal briefing. What we don't do is put out our cybersecurity arrangements out in the public domain.
Yes.
It'd be good to have a sort of session with you all. Now there's the team is back in place.
I think, David, we've been talking about that for some time, haven't we? Now we've got the massing exercise out of the way. Can we set that up early in the new year, please? Absolutely. Great, thank you. Any other observations or questions on the tracker?
When do you think the whole the new risk portfolio and risk register?
So that will come to the March meeting.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of outstandings.
Can I just mention one?
Then,
Just following on from the earlier paper on page 150, number 141. Revisions to the approach with a June meeting, which is about too much emphasis being on the audit of the accounts rather than perhaps giving the assurance that residents are asking for. And I wonder whether that's something that we're going to take forward.
sorry, I was just looking at my notes saying which one, just to
So
remind me again.
141
Right,
on
okay.
page 150.
Yeah.
Relating to the assurance mapping of growth and expenditure. So what we have here is, albeit a very robust and assuring paper, the extent to which it actually is going to answer the concerns of residents perhaps leads us to another piece of work.
And it's where that piece of work would sit. I think that's something we need to discuss with Mary and OSC.
There are decisions and then there's transparency, and I think the transparency will go a long way to allay those concerns.
I think this particular action chair was more about actually, when we came to in June, we were talking about the other source of insurance you could rely on, which had different materiality thresholds. That's why it's a substantive test. I didn't say it won't cast a sentence. This was about the kind of not just placing right on external sources, but what we could do as internals as well.
Thank you. Okay, so
Is that one not really clear? I thought we've done it.
I've done it.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
November.
So so I didn't have a chance before this got published to go through and take some of these things out.
Take with the Greens.
Yes, we,
okay, so as always, this is a continual piece of work. I mean, it's all backing up. But thank you for the progress that we made to date. Any other items on that? Yeah.
It's nice to see the Greens though.
Didn't we discuss that how we keep the greens on and that's
Once they've been green, then one meeting will drop.
yeah.
Yeah, we've
Okay.
got too many.
So that concludes the items on the agenda. Thank you for your attendance this evening. Thank you for all your contributions. And thank you, David and Mike. That's the meeting ended. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
next meeting, not till March.
Not till March.
It's not too early, may I wish you
Yeah.
all very happy 2024.
Yeah.
I know.
Good. I'm slowly finished. Now I've got.
Yeah.
Sort of that.
What?
Well, I do believe use of 40%. Yeah, which ones they are. You've got the same money group. There we go. You've got the same money group. I mean, the agenda was back to back.
Something every night, is it right?
You've got Thursdays.
I've got a lesson again as well.
Objection.
We've got Thursday.
But it's always in the morning.